Hello, this is Oleg Borisenko and Market Access Insider channel. In our programs, we discuss organization and financing for healthcare services and medical technologies in European countries. Today, we're in Paris, France, and we're going to talk to Michel Verhasselt, the founder and CEO of Meditech Access France, one of the best reimbursement consultancies in France. We're going to cover a broad range of topics, including organization and financing of healthcare services in Belgium, in nomenclature for procedures and medical technologies, as well as limited clinical application framework. Hope you will enjoy the program. Michel, thanks for joining us on this program.
Yeah, very happy to be here.
So can we start with the general overview of the reimbursement system for medical devices in Belgium?
Yes, sure. The Belgian system is a little bit like the French one. So there are two countries where you have a specific list actually on top of the hospital budget, I would say, in order to reimburse medical device and drugs. So you have probably Belgium is also a country, even if it's changing. I will talk to you more about that. But this is they don't have an ideology for the moment. So they have on the one side they have a hospital budget, on the other side they have a specific budget for medical device and drugs, with a specific evaluation process which is conducted by the payer itself. So it's not conducted by some independent agency. They have an independent agency, which is an HTA, which is called KCE. But the KCE is organized a specific way in Belgium.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then could you elaborate more on the role of, for example, again, in the nomenclature? So what is it like? Because it's the reimbursement for procedures, then there are also codes for devices, like for materials, and also nominative lists. Could you elaborate on this whole framework?
Right. So, so there's kind of a coding for the procedures, which has to be set up, and usually there's a group of medical doctors that have to control whether this has been set up or not. But I mean, the impact on reimbursement is not so key as it can be in other countries. But this is something that can be checked. Of course, there's some preliminary actions that has to be controlled because that will be part of a dossier to be submitted to INAMI or RECEIVE, so the payer. So first, of course, as a company, you have to be registered as a distributor, and there's a medical and drugs medical device agency, AFMPS. So you have to get your registration number. Then you have also to make sure that the devices are already registered at the INAMI. So they have two registrations. One is what they call there's a project registration which has to be listed. It's just an enlistment, very easy to do, but at least every product should get a specific number. So make sure that you do it. And also another one, which is probably more in the submission, which is called IREC. And this is the last preliminary action that has to be executed in order to be ready for a submission. So then, of course, there's a list of actions, so to get on the either list nominative or as a brand name or generic. So there's different categories which are different with a different coding system, depending whether the product is an implant or an invasive devices, and then different categories that has to be chosen. So if this is probably the most difficult way for a company where the line does not already exist. You have to create. So this is the A process. So I mean, in this process, it can take very long time. Although this procedure has been reduced to some official deadlines after 2014, but still it's been a progress in a certain way. but also another issue because there will probably be more rejection. So I want to just stop here because what you have to keep in mind is the two specificities in the Belgian system is so the fact that there are two very separate baskets. One is hospital budget, the other one is these drugs, and the rationale within the different baskets is completely independent. So when in DRG systems you may talk about budget impact or cost effectiveness, or maybe even argue that an innovative device may reduce hospital stay or hospital procedures. That point is absolutely not taken into officially not taken into account in the Belgian system, because the only case where it's very positive for a device is when it will replace another one or replace a drug, because this basket, the INAMI basket, unlike the hospital basket, is completely closed with existing drugs and medical devices. So this global basket has a certain value, and this value cannot really grow. So the challenge is there. So that's the reason, basically the reason why it's very difficult to enter a new innovative device in the Belgian system, although officially they have very interesting mechanisms, which of course they will very rarely use. So again, so you have different categories of products, whether this is getting to a new line or an existing line. And then, of course, if, for example, I have a device in the line which exists, I want to get, and there are some rules which are very specific to the lines. For example, I have a new stent, and it's written on the list that if I want to register, they have to check the clinical evidence which is available in order to be listed. And I have to do a small dossier to present this dossier, and they will check whether I have these clinical evidence with X patients, X centers, and of course there's other things to present in this dossier, but it's only checking. I mean, it's not an extensive evaluation process like an HTA evaluation process like the one the KC will execute, or the HS in France or EQUIC in Germany will do. So this is probably more like just check. Okay, so these are this is done, and if everything is okay, then the product will be listed.
All right.
So and this is a 180 days process.
So if we can summarize two compartments: one hospital budget, another one budget for devices, procedures and drugs, and then so there are several reimbursement categories: procedure codes, then codes for materials, and then materials could be reimbursed either as a generic category or by brands, and then NME determines for each code also the criteria.
You're right. And there's another last criteria will be the level of co-payment from 0 to I think around 80%. So it's a little letter at the end. It's ABCDE, which will indicate the level of co-payment of the device, and which is also a little bit specific because some other countries will have no official co-payment. So I mean, this is already, or they do have, but it's the level is indicated in the reimbursement, and also what will be then also published is the margin that a hospital can do, which is with different sellings, which is also indicated in the reimbursement.
All right. So let's discuss the pathway to introduce a new, and let's focus first on the procedure. Let's say if there is no procedure code, so that the intent is to create both procedure code and material code. Yeah. So who is the applicant?
The applicant, in Belgium, the applicant is the company. So, if it's a pure procedure, then that can be executed by the medical society. But if it's, again, through an application of a medical device, that will be the company. With the support of the medical society.
And given the specifics of the assessment process, like you said, for example, with budget impact on that particular compartment of budget, so what's the composition of the dossier?
Well, I mean, this is an interesting point, because I told you, like, for example, we know that in the French system, when you do an application, this is only clinical. In Belgium, the application, there are some chapters on budget impact and cost effectiveness. Even if I said that has no real value because we present the dossier to INAMI, which is only a payer, and also this payer is only looking at the closed envelope of medical device and drugs. But this is surprising that you have to provide a budget impact study and a cost effectiveness. For me, this is kind of a controversy because you have to do it, but at the end of the day, we don't understand why. So, I mean, because if it's strongly positive, there's no connection between the INAMI budget and the BMF, so the hospital budget envelope. Well, but okay, in terms of competition of the dossier, okay, so you have to present the administrative elements of the company, you have to present the clinical elements, technical elements, target population and indications and so on. Also all the material vigilance and brochures, and of course these budget impact and cost effectiveness, and also the financial, there's a financial part presenting the some elements of the company, or also market.
I know that for some devices it is required to register price also prior to application.
Yeah, so this was a little bit more before. There was a small dossier that you had for certain devices. We have to check because this list is changing all the time as it's been reduced. But some implants had to be to get a maximum price, which was a specific dossier submitted to SPE Economy, so the Ministry of Economy, and there was a specific departments to fix a maximum price. This is not a reimbursement price. This is a maximum price.
So what?
And this price has to figure to be put then in the reimbursement dossier to INAMI.
So what are the evidence requirements for reimbursement registration, and how do they relate, for example, to French evidence requirements?
Okay, so I mean, first, let's come back. So for these registration where there are some specific elements, so this is like a black and white. You do have that element or not. So this is really simple. For the first category where the line does not exist, I said this is long. Sometimes, even if you present very strong clinical arguments, then they may try to increase a little bit the level of evidence. So sometimes one tool will be to require a specific evaluation from KCE. Well, you don't really know whether this is really true or this is because they want to get additional evidence or they want to get additional time to a little bit delay the reimbursement. Sometimes also they will look at the French or maybe German or Dutch HTA, but probably not the INAMI, but more the KCE will do it. So that's the reason why. So the KCE will be also looking at, but also probably this is good to present because relationship with the neighbors are strong, and to present situation of reimbursement in these other countries is probably important. And I think because if you look at the template, the reimbursement template, it's been very much influenced by the French HS template. So there's some parallelism. So which is actually interesting because in the strategy, you can save time sometimes if you make a global. I mean, you think about doing a dossier for France, but you think about doing a dossier to Belgium in the same time because 70% of the composition of the dossier will be similar. So, but one thing that the companies has to be careful is about the language of the submission, because you have to submit. The rule is that if the company is located in Belgium, if they are in the Flemish part, then the submission has to be Flemish, in Dutch. If it's in the French part, then it has to be in French. If it's foreign companies, then it can be either in French, Dutch, or English.
Okay. But then the evidence requirements, for example, again, is it required to have RCT or more than one RCT, any other supportive evidence? And again,
that really depends. That will be case by case because it depends on what is required on the line. So it could be RCT if it's required. Of course, if you do an RCT, it's a top, and then of course, probably this is the best situation for the company. But it's a real case by case. Sorry, for the new line, again, the RCT will be better. But you may be sometimes a little bit surprised because, as I said, they will be very reluctant. But of course, is there very strong evidence? It will be very difficult for INAMI to refuse. But still, if they don't have the budget, they may again want to delay and require an additional evaluation by KCE, which will require an RCT.
Yeah. So we reviewed, I think, last year the statistics for recent new devices added to the list. I think for 1 or 2 years there was something like 8 or 9 devices in total, so not that many devices entered the list.
Okay.
So probably again because of high evidence requirements.
Exactly.
So in Belgium, there is also the concept of limited clinical application for some devices. Could you elaborate on this concept?
Yeah, and it's funny because, I mean, if you look at these mechanisms, even, for example, the French Forfait Innovation has been strongly inspired by the Belgian ACL because it was called Category 5 before 2015. It's become ACL, limited clinical application, since that date. But the concept has been set up by some health economists. I think that even some renowned economists like Lieven and Mans wrote on these concepts and know them very well. The idea is, again, to have a clinical protocol set up in dedicated centers for a limited period of time. And during that period, the device or the drug will be reimbursed. So maybe the challenge for INAMI is to be selective, to select the centers. So they have this tool, which is the ACL, and even more than that, they have what they call the contract. So they have, unlike other countries, they have this possibility to set up a very detailed contract, hospital by hospital, detailing the number of patients, the number of centers, the target population, whatever they want. So for me, they have in the text all the elements to protect the budget they want to allocate to a clinical study. And this is a discussion I had very often with the Belgian Trade Association, but so that Belgium has in the text probably the best mechanism systems, but unfortunately they don't use it, or very rarely. But I mean, the challenge and the second issue with the ACL is that, unlike in France, for example, so it's not possible to really submit and directly require for an ACL. That will be the decision of the CREDMI, of the Commission, to decide for either a reimbursement or an ACL. So you have to be a little bit subtle, for example, in your submission dossier to say, if you know in advance that you're a little bit weak in terms of clinical evidence, just to say, okay, we know this technology can be easily done in those centers, and list the centers to probably talk about a potential protocol. So that will probably draw the Commission to an ACL.
Mm-hmm. And what's the pathway? So after being in this program for a while, is the idea that the technology will be reevaluated again for the
right, exactly. We evaluate and then create a new list.
Mm-hmm. All right. You mentioned in the beginning that Belgium is moving towards DRG system. What are the recent changes?
Yeah, so first of this year, they created a first list of DRG. So this is the very first step. This is not replacing the current reimbursement, but this will replace today the ACT payment, for the fee for the doctors. So the new, I think there are 77 or 70, around 70 DRGs, and some group of patients. So that will pay for the fees. Mm-hmm. So, and then the plan is to grow and evolve, mm-hmm. and probably embark then hospitals and probably at the end all the different elements of the healthcare costs. But today, 1st of January 2019, it's been only for the medical fees.
All right, but is it already implemented or is it still in the?
This is already implemented.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that's more or less the biggest change. Any other reforms or any other plans?
No, the last was the change of the evaluation process, because before 2014 there was no timing, and the big problem that before that date is that there was some dossiers that were there waiting for the evaluation for years and years. So now this is a restricted timeline. But the also indirect impact is that more dossiers are refused. So the last big change was in 2014, and so the most recent one is the DRG implementation, which has already started.
All right. So if we can summarize the most common mistakes done by the medical device companies in Belgium. Okay, so first, I would maybe, Belgium is very strange. Sometimes we may believe, because in certain cases, because it is very complex and long, we believe that it will be probably the worst nightmare. Sometimes if this is an already reimbursed device, it can be really straightforward. So the biggest mistake will be also not having a very clear market access plan, and maybe do mistakes in terms of planning on one way or the other, either being too much optimistic or too pessimistic. Or in the beginning, I did these mistakes sometimes, so believing that it will take me 2 years to get reimbursement, and it took me 6 months to get it. On the other way, for the TAVI, for example, we believe that it will take at least 2 years. But today, for example, they started reimbursement after 10 years. First reimbursement, which was really limited. And then still today, so this is not the big success that everybody was expected. And what else? That's probably the biggest mistake. And then other mistakes, difficult to say, because for certain countries, I would say doing a very good dossier with strong medical plan will be the key for success. But in Belgium, this is not a guarantee. So basically, I will restrict my advice to have a very clear plan and know where the device should end up. Yeah, and also then consider both clinical and economic evidence, right, compared to some other countries, as we have discussed.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. But thank you very much, Michel. That was very insightful.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.